A digital voice can forge a confession, but it cannot forge a soul. By the time the probate court realized the difference, the family estate was already gone. David thought the family trust was an unbreakable shield protecting his ailing father. His older sister Claire had managed the medical paperwork for 6 months without a single complaint. He assumed the emergency probate hearing was just a routine legal formality, until the judge pressed play on a digital audio file submitted into evidence, and the terrifying sound of his own voice echoing through the courtroom left him paralyzed. Arthur was an 80-year-old retired industrial developer. He spent his days in a sunlit corner room of an assisted living facility, his antique pocket watch resting on the bedside table. Claire lived 10 minutes away and managed his daily visits. David lived across the country, running a logistics firm, but flew back every other weekend. Arthur's cognitive health was slipping, but his $50 million estate was firmly divided between the two siblings. Claire didn't want half. She filed a secret petition for emergency medical and financial guardianship. Claire didn't hire a lawyer to legally dispute the will. She weaponized the county family court system. She submitted 3 digital voicemails directly to the presiding judge. The recordings featured David screaming violent threats, demanding Arthur sign over the estate, and promising physical harm to the nursing staff. The judge listened to the audio and immediately issued a permanent restraining order against David. Claire was granted unilateral control over Arthur's medical directives and financial accounts. She legally barred David from the hospital wing and began routing the trust into a series of layered custodial transfers. The judge signed the final order within the hour. For 8 months, David was locked out of his father's life. Claire sat by Arthur's bed, holding his hand, whispering that his son had abandoned him. The custodial accounts swelled with liquidated real estate. Arthur's heart monitor beeped rhythmically in the background. Then the forensic server chimed. David spent $100,000 in legal fees trying to appeal the guardianship. The appellate court dismissed his motions. The judicial system treats authenticated audio as irrefutable evidence. David took the court-provided audio files to an independent forensic sound engineer. The engineer loaded the MP4 files into his diagnostic software. He saw the massive legal injunction attached to the metadata. The engineer hovered his mouse over the rejection template, knowing that disputing a sitting judge's evidence could cost him his state license. He sat in the dark studio for 5 minutes, listening to the raw terror in the recorded voice. Then, he chose the hard path and opened the visual spectrum analyzer. David sat in the studio lobby, exhausted and defeated. He had his phone in his hand, ready to text his lawyer to drop the appeal and let Claire win. He couldn't afford to fight a ghost. But as he typed the final sentence, the heavy studio door swung open. The engineer didn't play the audio. He pointed to a silent mathematical graph on his monitor. It was the spectrogram, the visual fingerprint of the sound waves. The engineer isolated the microscopic background frequencies. Human voices recorded on cellular networks carry a chaotic, messy layer of digital compression and ambient static. The graph on the screen was mathematically flat. It was a pristine, synthetic rendering. Claire had fed hours of David's old corporate logistics podcasts into a commercial AI voice cloning software. She hadn't recorded a threat. She had typed a script. David didn't take the spectrogram back to the family court. He took it directly to the FBI Cybercrimes Division. The intake desk flagged the case as a standard domestic dispute and initially deprioritized the file. But a junior agent looked at the spectrogram and bypassed the standard queue. Federal agents subpoenaed the API logs from the AI voice software company. They matched the exact generation timestamps to the dates Claire submitted the court evidence. They traced the IP address of the user who generated the threatening audio files. It led straight to the Wi-Fi router in Claire's living room. Agents tracked the liquidated trust funds moving from the custodial accounts back into her personal brokerage portfolio. The digital forgery had left a permanent, unalterable receipt. Claire was meeting with a private wealth manager at a high-end steakhouse to finalize the transfer of the remaining assets. Federal cyber agents didn't flash their badges at the host stand. They walked directly to her private booth. The wealth manager was mid-sentence when an agent placed a printed copy of the AI generation logs over the dinner plate. Claire didn't scream or deny it. She stared at her own IP address printed on the federal paper as the cold steel closed around her wrists. The shadow guardianship ended before the appetizers arrived. Claire was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for aggravated identity theft and perjury. The courts reversed the guardianship and returned the remaining estate to David. But the victory was hollow. Arthur had suffered a fatal stroke 2 weeks before the arrest. He spent his final days terrified, believing his only son was a violent predator coming to hurt him. David got the money back, but he lost his father to a digital lie. Now, David refuses to use voice notes or participate in recorded phone calls. He uses localized, encrypted text for all business communication. He legally demands that any digital evidence presented against him be verified by a physical, in-person witness. The family court system was built to evaluate paper, not artificial intelligence. When a judge trusts a digital file over a physical human being, the system becomes a weapon. A voice is no longer proof of presence. How easily could someone clone your voice from your public social media profiles? Send this video to your family members who still trust everything they hear. Ask them what their safe word is. The answer might save them from a digital trap.